For the first time in many years, Red Bull has two Formula 1 drivers in competition. It's a scenario the team had almost certainly not planned for, and there are already signs of it causing problems. Sergio Perez's victory in the Monaco Grand Prix came on the weekend he was genuinely faster than teammate Max Verstappen for the first time. And it triggered an immediate and bizarre condemnation of Red Bull from Verstappen's father Jos. Checo challenging and beating Max could happen more often this year given how competitive he looks in the 2022 RB18. But will that be allowed to happen? As we get into this story, please let us know in the comments how you feel about the driver dynamic at Red Bull, especially now Perez has signed a 2-year contract extension. Should Perez be allowed to race Verstappen on equal footing, or is he there to be a reliable backup to the world champion? Perez's win in Monaco lifted him to third in the standings, 15 behind championship leader Verstappen. It was a richly deserved peak in a season Perez has ticked a lot of boxes. He's driving well, qualifying better, and is a solid team player. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner described him as in the form of his career at the moment, and it's hard to argue with that. Perez has made a clear step from a difficult 2021 season, which had a few high points but ended with some questions about whether he was really good enough to be in that car. But the 2021 Red Bull was the last in a specific development cycle that was led by Verstappen, whose innate car control meant Red Bull felt it could pursue a higher upside development path with a tough-to-tame car trait because Verstappen could live with it. His teammates, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon and Perez, often couldn't. While Perez was limited by the rear instability of the 2021 Red Bull, the change in car characteristics brought by the 2022 technical regulations have helped him immediately. This year's Red Bull is less on the nose, which basically means it has a less aggressive front end and the rear is more settled. The car now has an understeering balance. That means Verstappen can't get the car to turn as sharply as he could in recent years when his supreme car control allowed him to destroy teammates for fun. But in Monaco this year, Perez was the one who had the confidence to throw the car around without hesitating, while the circuit's overload of short corners and changes of direction imposed more of a limit on Verstappen than any race so far this season. It took until the very end of qualifying before the combination of car setup and tyre preparation brought Verstappen up to Perez's level. But Verstappen didn't get to finish his final lap in qualifying because Perez, of all people, caused a red flag that ended the session early. While Max seemed to shrug off Monaco as just a weekend in which things didn't quite line up, his outspoken and controversial father Jos clearly didn't see it that way. Bizarrely, Max's official website published a statement from Jos on Monday after the race in which Jos laid into Red Bull for, in basic terms, not favouring his son and making him win the race. Verstappen Sr. criticised the team for exerting little influence to help Max to the front and instead making strategic choices that turned the race completely to Checo's favour. He said it should have been his son who was prioritised as the championship leader and said Red Bull had thrown away 10 points. Perhaps the fact Perez was the lead car in the race meant Red Bull was entitled to consider him the best chance of winning, but who are we to judge? Jos also stressed we need every point, which suggests he has decided on Red Bull's behalf that Max and only Max is allowed to fight the Ferraris for the championship. Given Red Bull turned third and fourth in the first stint into a 1-3 finish and pounced on Ferrari's blunder to punish chief rival Charles Leclerc, the team can feel very happy with its strategic choices in terms of aiding its championship pushes. Jos admitting he's not an objective observer in all this, plus a cursory congratulations to Perez at the end of this bizarre and clearly deliberate outburst, did nothing to offset the air of pettiness around his graceless statement. Jos Verstappen has long been an imposing, polarising and difficult figure in the background at Red Bull. He's now made it very clear, in public, that Red Bull can expect trouble unless it does everything to help Max win, even if that means compromising Perez. While Red Bull doesn't do number 1 and number 2 labels, Max Verstappen has been the priority for a while. That's probably where the similarities between our view and Jos's begin and end. Whether Jos likes it or not, Perez is looking like a consistent challenger to Max at the moment and will surely have designs on mounting a title bid of his own. So Red Bull is now in a complicated position, even though Horner insists the team doesn't care which driver is world champion and says both had the same chance. Perez being able to fight for the championship implies he will be in open competition with his teammate. Apart from the potential issues it will cause within the Verstappen camp, it means Perez will have his own interests to protect. He will not just be there to be the wingman. And we have already had evidence that Perez isn't going to be a willing number 2 in certain situations, just 1 week before Monaco in Spain. Perez was moved aside for Verstappen in the race and was not allowed to overtake him again afterwards when on a different strategy. The tone of voice in his post-race radio message of "I'm happy for the team, but we need to speak later" in Spain, and the slight but weighty pause before that "but" hinted that this race could be where Perez joined the long list of F1 support acts who felt too much had been asked of them. Ultimately, this was the correct strategic call from Red Bull. Verstappen was always likely to win the race anyway, and this just smoothed the path. It also meant he took the lead of the championship. A quick interjection from Horner as soon as Perez got out of the car post-race meant his disgruntled driver was mostly all smiles and diplomacy in the interviews and on the podium. But the lingering frustration that had prompted Perez to say that's really unfair but okay when he was asked to let Verstappen through for the second time in the race was still present every time he repeated variations of "we just have a few things to discuss internally." Perez seemed to get the necessary assurance he wasn't being screwed over, and that in a different scenario he would be allowed to prioritise his own race. But what's interesting is that for the first time, Perez did briefly push back. It's easy to think that he's just going to be there as the happy, subservient driver because it's a great chance to drive for one of the top teams. But what happened in Spain suggests that actually he's not really that happy in that role if he thinks he's genuinely the faster driver or going to have the faster race. And the more weekends he has like Monaco and the longer he stays in a title fight, the stronger that feeling will be. This doesn't mean Checo and Max are about to fall out. Both drivers said in Monaco they have a strong relationship and there's no reason for that to change. Perez jokingly asked Verstappen if they are still going to be in love if they fight each other for the title, to which Verstappen agreed. But Red Bull has gone from having ostensibly the simplest driver pairing to manage to having the two drivers in closest competition among the top teams. So it's potentially a fascinating shift in the dynamic that we can now watch develop. Whatever signs there are of any potential disturbance in Red Bull's lineup, they've emerged after Perez negotiated a new 2-year deal. Red Bull announced on Tuesday after his win in Monaco that Perez will continue driving for the team until the end of 2024. This comes as absolutely no surprise to anyone who was paying attention over the Monaco weekend. Television cameras seemed to catch a grinning Perez saying, "I probably signed too early," as he threw an arm round Horner after winning in Monaco. And when he was asked about it in the post-race press conference, Perez and Verstappen just burst out laughing. Perez then tried to contend his comment was about signing a bottle of champagne. "We know how you feel, Checo, we're always signing bottles of champagne earlier than we should." Mistimed autographs aside, it was pretty obvious Perez's renewal was either as good as done or done already, and it turns out it was the latter. But Red Bull couldn't begrudge a slip of the tongue from Perez in the emotion of winning Monaco. A new 2-year deal might make it look ridiculous to suggest Red Bull could have any kind of concerns about Perez and what it'll mean if he keeps challenging Verstappen, especially as Perez has been hailed as a mega team player and has a genuinely good relationship with Max. Why would Red Bull have re-signed a potential troublemaker for the medium term if the threat of a fallout was real? But the fact Perez has earned a 2-year deal, not just a 1-year extension, actually supports the point we're making. He's been seriously good this year. You have to be to get that contract. And being seriously good in a Red Bull means fighting for poles, winning races and running at the top of the championship. You know, the things Jos Verstappen thinks Max should be doing without a teammate getting in the way. So even if Red Bull is happy with Perez's form this year and it's prepared to manage the situation between its two drivers now they are both right at the front, Jos being so quick to speak out against Red Bull after Monaco suggests there could be plenty more of this to come. The point is, Checo's here to stay, and if he stays on this level, it gives Red Bull a cliched good problem to have, but a problem nonetheless. If Perez is this good until the end of 2024, does that mean the team will be treading on eggshells waiting for an outburst from the other side of the garage? Or will it have to make a decision that puts Perez firmly in a supporting role and risks upsetting him? Or will Red Bull just let them have at it with all the potential fun that brings? Only one of those answers is really satisfactory from a sporting perspective, and it's not the one Jos Verstappen will approve of.